Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Two division winners have been pushed to the brink. Welcome to NHL Wraparound for May 13, 2025. Vic Morren along with Neil Smith, and shortly we will be joined by our special guest, former NHL referee and current ESPN rules analyst Dave Jackson. But first, three things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc. Number one, the Edmonton Oilers on the cusp of a return to the Western Conference Final, a 3-0 shutout over Vegas in game number 4.
And there was no 0.3-second goal by Vegas to tie it up in this one, and this was all Edmonton. In fact, it all got done in the first two periods and absolutely nothing in the third.
I think they learned their lesson from game 3 about getting on top early and then staying on the gas.
Yeah, well, they did that last night, and Stuart Skinner got his first win of the playoffs.
We're going to do a deeper dive into that game later on in the show, as we will with item number 2, because Carolina is now one win of the Eastern Final, winning both of their games in Raleigh. They remain undefeated at home in the playoffs, a 5-2 win over the Caps in game 4. And for the fourth consecutive game, the Caps are finding it very difficult to answer the Carolina pressure.
They sure are, and they're also just not keeping up with Carolina. They're not able to stay with them. Carolina's better than them in every part of the game, including the goaltending, which is what we thought was suspect for Carolina. It isn't, and Carolina has proven this year something that we are waiting to see. Could they beat an opponent like Washington with the season Washington had, and Carolina going into it as the underdog in the series? And we're getting our answer.
Item number 3, Ken Holland on the verge of becoming the Kings' new general manager, according to reports. He spent 27 years as the GM of the Red Wings and Oilers, winning 4 Stanley Cups, 1 as an assistant and 3 as the general manager in Detroit. He would replace Rob Blake, who parted ways with the Kings after 8 seasons. They had no playoff wins during that time. And 4 of those losses were against Edmonton, 3 of them coming with Holland as GM of the Oilers. So, Neil, the Kings have $23 million in cap space heading into free agency. So if Holland assumes that role, where do you see him taking this club?
Well, he'll probably do the same intelligence that he's done in both in Detroit and in Edmonton. He knows how to put together a staff. He knows how to look for things. He knows how to do it. And there's not going to be any big dark secrets with Ken Holland. We've seen him do this over 27 years, as you mentioned. So, while you can't hit home runs on every hit, and I'll remind you of guys like Jack Campbell that he signed that were a complete bust, I'll remind you, too, that he gave a chance to Evander Kane, who's been great for them. He signed Zach Hyman, who's been great for Edmonton. He did a number of different things, including Corey Perry decision to bring him when he was released by Chicago. And so he's done a lot of things that are solid doubles, triples, the odd home run and the odd strikeout. But you're going to get that when you're a GM. You're going to have a lot of strikeouts because you're going for the fence.
Stay tuned for that to become official in the not too distant future. And this has been 3 things you need to pay attention to, brought to you by UBS Financial Services, Inc.
And now welcoming back into NHL Wraparound, Dave Jackson. Dave is the ESPN rules analyst. You see him on TV every time there's something that needs explaining, which is pretty regularly. And Dave was a referee in the National Hockey League from 89 to 2018, which is a heck of a long career to be out there skating 60 minutes a night. And people don't realize the conditioning that referees have to be in to be able to do that. They don't think about it. Players get to go onto the bench and rest. Referees and linesmen have to keep going. But Dave, thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. And if you could get inside my body when I wake up in the morning, you'd believe I was on the ice for 30 years because the aches and pains are all there, man.
So, Dave, what do you think about this year's playoffs from the refereeing, officiating standpoint? How do you think it's going for the league?
You know, I think it's going like it does every year. I think in hindsight, you look back and say the refereeing was pretty darn good. In the moment, people's hair are on fire like they are every year. And, I mean, there's just every call and every non-call is just so magnified come this time of year that people make such a big deal about it. And what's funny is like my Twitter account blows up, but it blows up strictly by the fans of this so-called team that got a call go against them. The rest of the hockey world looks at it, shrugs, and goes, you know what, it could have gone either way. But fans are convinced the referees and the league are out to get them.
So that's a good place to start because Neil and I had some debate on this hit that took place in the fourth game between the Panthers and the Maple Leafs. Oliver Ekman-Larsson stepping up, blindside hit on Evan Rodriguez. He, as of now, has not been ruled out for Game 5, but he hasn't been cleared yet, meaning Rodriguez. So the question is, did you see a headshot in here? What was your interpretation once you were able to get a close look at this play?
Just to be clear, because Rodriguez has taken a number of hits, we're not talking about the one against the glass. We're talking about the open ice hit that was called interference. Right. You know what? I saw that, and I don't think it was worth a game misconduct. I didn't see an injury to the face or head, but he did stay down for a bit. Could it have been a 5-minute major, a standalone 5-minute major? Sure, it could have. But you got to understand the referees aren't doctors. So the definition of an injury is different for everybody. Definitely a penalty. Definitely interference. They called 2. Could it have been 5? Sure, it could have in hindsight. But see, the referees, what people don't understand is they think the referees just call 5 every time, and that allows them to look at it and then reduce it or rescind it. Referees don't referee like that. They don't just hedge their bets and go, we're just going to not do our jobs and call 5 so we get to go review it. They have integrity. They have their own internal judgment. They get together, they talk about it. And if they don't feel it rises to the level of a 5-minute major, they're not going to take the easy way out and call 5 just to review it. Now, I know in a perfect world that sounds great. And if the powers that be said, hey, we want you reviewing everything, then that would be one way to look at it. It might still have been 2, or it might have been 5. But they don't have that luxury right now. They're told to go out there and go with their gut, do their job. They're paid for their judgment. So they got together. They decided it was a 2-minute minor. Everybody agreed it was a penalty. They called 2 minutes, and you move on.
I want to move to another play in that particular game where at the end of the game, Max Domi ran Alex Barkov from behind. He ends up only with a $5,000 fine, which was a pretty needless and, quite frankly, a brutal hit that he delivered. And do you believe that this is only a fine somewhat in relation to the Nick Waugh, Trent Frederic cross-check where that was only a fine also? Is there any sort of reluctance to maybe hand out suspensions when guys aren't hurt for what are still violent acts?
Well, you've got 2 different, playoff suspensions obviously are way more impactful than a mid-November suspension, obviously. You're essentially, it's a 7-game season, and you're taking a guy out for a minimum 1/7 of the season. So that's very impactful. The cross check, you know what? It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was careless. Was it premeditated? No. It was a brain cramp in the moment. He's there. He's pushing. I want to believe he was going for his chest area, an FU type cross check, and he missed. Team got a 5-minute power play. They didn't capitalize on it, but that's a big advantage in overtime. You get a 5-minute power play. Was it suspension worthy? I don't know. It certainly was. Like I said, it wasn't a premeditated thing. You go to the Domi hit, and I believe the only reason he got fined was because of the score and how much time was left in the game. The hit itself was way less severe than some of the other hits we've seen. If that had happened in the second period, I believe it would have been a 2-minute minor. He hit him from behind, but he was far enough from the boards. He kind of slid into the boards. He didn't hit his face on the boards. He didn't go down. To me, that's a 2-minute minor, cheap play, but he's taking it because he knows there's no repercussion. Power play is not going to hurt his team, so let's just take a pound of flesh right now. We can't beat him on the ice. Let's beat him in the alley. Set up next game. But as far as the action itself, you can't be suspending guys just because of the time of game and you know what was going through his mind. Yeah, it was cheap. But the action itself, I believe, would have been a 2-minute minor penalty had it happened at any other point in the game.
Dave, I want to throw my own theories by you on something, and that's goaltender injuries. And you and I were in the league. You stayed a lot longer than me, but I mean, we were in the league in the same vintage of
you had a lot more
time.
Success, though, Neil.
I don't know how you define success, but anyway, goaltender injuries. There was a time back around 89 when I started with the Rangers and you started officiating in the NHL. You rarely saw a goaltender hurt. Like if they were hurt, it might have been from a slap shot that they took in the neck, or they got too badly bruised, or something like that. But you didn't see many injuries. So here comes my theory on this, or my thought process on it. One is that equipment has continued to evolve in scientific ways over those 30 plus years, 35 years. Second thing is that we changed the rules that were one rule that was elementary to the way I grew up and the way that I played pro for my limited career and the way that we used to talk to our players, which is clear the front of the net. If you're a defenseman, you wanted a big guy that could clear the front of the net so that A, the goalie could see the puck, and B, to get him the hell away from our goalie, because we don't want anybody going near our goalie. We don't want him getting hurt. Well, with the invention of great scientific equipment, now you only need to block the puck. It never hurts, almost no matter where you get hit. Sometimes if you get hit hard in the mask, it can give you a concussion, but it rarely hurts the goalie. I mean, they're not all bruised up at the end of the game like they used to be. And the second thing is that they brought in this interference clampdown where you can't clear the front of the net. You can't touch the guy if he doesn't have the puck in front of the net. So now everybody goes to the front of the net to take the eyes away from the goaltender. And when you go to the front of the net to take the eyes away from the goaltender, you end up backing into him a little bit, or touching or banging into him, because your job is to get to the front of the net and take his eyes away. And so now you got guys falling backwards and hitting their head. You've got goaltenders hitting the post. You've got goalies getting hurt on all different angles. And how do you see that? Do you think that that commentary is correct, or would you have another explanation for why goalies are getting hurt so often now?
I think all of the above. You're bang on, and you look at guys. You're a little older than I am, but in my era, you had guys in front of the net. You had Al McInnes, Chris Pronger, Adam Foote. Those guys. I mean, I'm sure the guys that ended up in the shower afterwards, they had Sherwood tattooed across their lower back or their upper back or across their neck. I mean, we didn't back in the 90s. A 5-on-3 was it was an aberration. You rarely saw a 5-on-3. So you would call a penalty on a team, and as a referee, you'd be like, oh man, I'm going to have to really struggle to keep my arm down here because it's going to get worse on the 5-on-3, 5-on-4. And you know, guys would be hitting guys up in the name bar, and you get a quick whistle, and you go over to a guy like Pronger or Adam Foote, and you say, hey, listen, I know it's your job to move the guy. Just keep your stick below the name bar. And they'd be, hey, thanks, Jacks, thanks. Drop the puck, and the first one will be off the back of the helmet. And they're trying to look at you like, hey, what do you think of that? And then, you know, choice was to allow it or call a 5-on-3. And if it got too bad, you called the 5-on-3. But the guys going in front of the net, they knew they were going to pay the price. We clamp down on cross-checking now. You can't cross-check a guy. I mean, I think it's for the better of the game. But you cannot cross-check a guy in front of the net anymore. You're going to be down 5-on-3. And good for the game for doing that. And interference, hooking, holding. Guys they couldn't drive the net without the puck. 2-on-1 or a 2-on-2 with the guy without the puck who would drive the net, he'd have a guy water skiing on him. So his speed going to that net was much. Now there's nobody hooking them. They're going on that full flight. And another thing we forget is the goalposts used to be metal pegs that were in there. Guys knew that they blew a wheel going on that net, they're going to get hurt. Now the net comes off. So there's really no downside to driving that net. And if you get a piece of the goaltender, especially if it's accidentally on purpose, all the better.
Yeah, because we really do see, I mean, it's all the time. Think about these playoffs. What team hasn't had a goalie hurt yet? I mean, I got to think hard to think of a team that, you know, hasn't had a goalie injury. But nevertheless, that's great. I mean, I love to hear that from a referee's perspective, which is very similar to mine. But going to another situation we had the other night, I think the craziest one we've seen in the playoffs so far was that long discussion in the Winnipeg-Dallas series of whether or not Petrovic kicked the puck into the net. And it took like what seemed like forever to everybody, the people in the building, the players, the coaches, everybody, while the two poor referees stood there and waited for the Toronto to give them the answer to the official review. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, because to me and Vic, I can speak for Vic because we talked about a lot, like first look at it, we were going, well, that's not kicking. They didn't kick it. It went from one foot to the other to the paddle and into the net. And that was on my first look at it. And Toronto's got 3,000 looks at it. And I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Well, my thoughts were watching it. I was thinking, it wasn't on our network, so I had the luxury of sitting on the couch and watching it. I'll say I'm glad it was counted a goal, because I believed it was a good goal, but not for the same reasons. Much like you guys, and that's the beauty or lack thereof of hockey. Everything's a gray area. Everything's judgment. It's not baseball where, you know, you break it down. Did the ball beat the runner? Is he out or safe? Like, it would be great if we had that. The only call we have like that basically is puck out of play. So everything's a judgment call. And I'm sure if you showed that video in a room full of general managers, it would probably be 50-50 or 60-40 at best, going one way or the other. So unfortunately, hockey's a judgment call. Pretty much every rule in the book. I looked at it. Yes, there's motion with his foot. Is it a distinct kicking motion? Did he, was it a field goal in football? No, he didn't wind up with his foot. There was movement on his foot. He's directing the puck. I say let all kicks go. It make things a lot easier. Goaltenders no longer are barefaced. They wear masks. The skates aren't pointy like they were back in 60s and 70s. But I didn't think it was a distinct kicking motion. I thought the Winnipeg, the guy closest to the player making the kick, I thought his stick might have actually hit the puck immediately after skate contact, and then it went into the net. I don't feel the goaltender propelled it, but that's just my opinion. But for whatever, however they got there, I'm glad they counted the goal. I believe the goal deserved to count.
Considering how much intensity and how ferocious the play is in the playoffs, and certainly the first round is always a great example of that, because everybody's just so ready to get going and make this push for the Stanley Cup. Have you been surprised that through 61 playoff games, through Monday night that the Nick Hague, Trent Frederic fight in the first period was the first in the playoffs this year. And, you think of all the other things that went on and Josh Anderson and Tom Wilson going at it in the benches. And it turns out that those were only roughing penalties. But I was shocked to hear that was the first fighting major in the playoffs thus far.
Well, it's funny you say that because as I was telling you guys off air, I went golfing with my daughter yesterday, and then we went for dinner and I spent the day with her. And I'm down in Tucson, which is not, it's not. There's a small pocket of hockey fans, but it's not really a hockey hotbed. And we were in this restaurant, brewery / place, and we were ordering some food to go, and we're sitting there, and they had the basketball on, and they had the hockey on. And the entire bar was watching the basketball game until the fight happened. And then you could not have taken anybody's eyes off the hockey game. And they were raving about it. They were like, this is the greatest sport in the world. So it's funny. You talk about, the stereotypical, they talk about Americans don't like hockey because there's too much fighting. No, Americans love hockey because of the fighting. And it just adds to the organic, appreciation of the game. But I think the reason you don't have much fighting is because coaches preach and preach and preach, don't take dumb penalties. And that instigator penalty, like it or love it, does a huge impediment to people wanting to drop the gloves and fight. Because what if they get called for instigator and put their team down for 2 minutes? And killing a penalty in the playoffs, as we know it, is everything. You cannot take penalties. And if you do, and you're not a first-line player, you might be sitting your butt on the bench the rest of the game if they score on a power play. So I think that's why you don't see much fighting in the playoffs.
Dave, one of the things that I know the casual fan, no, even me, I don't understand, is, when there's a scrum in today's 2025 hockey, the guys literally punch each other with their glove on. Right, you see this every game. And then they in the shield, but they rabbit punch each other. They sometimes punch hard at each other. Sometimes even their glove comes off, but they don't swing a bare fist at the guy. That's never called roughing. It's just let's let it go. Now, if I did that to you when during the game, I'd get a roughing penalty. And I guess what's hard for the non-expert to understand is, why isn't roughing? Like, if you punch a guy in the head, why does it matter that the play's going on? Then it's a roughing penalty. But if the play's not going on and you punch him, it's not a roughing penalty.
Well, we're talking the science of refereeing versus the art of refereeing. And it's more of an art. When the whistle goes, if you've got, especially in a playoff game, if the whistle goes and you've got two guys that are equally popping each other in the face, and it's not overly egregious, a verbal warning maybe the guy deserved the punch in the mouth because of what he was saying, and he got him back. And boys will be boys. Sometimes guys want to get punched in the mouth to try and make it 4-on-4 because their team excels 4-on-4. So you tend to have a little bit more tolerance for stuff that goes on after the whistle, unless it becomes repetitive. Now, if you see that happen, if it's clearly one guy who hauls off and pops a guy in the face, what would be known as an assault, that should be called. I mean, absolutely, that should be called every time, and the team should pay for that by being down a man. But if it's just guys pushing, shoving, and it's pretty much equal on both sides, the referees will probably let that go 1 or 2 times. After that, they'll probably go to the benches and say, listen, we've given you guys enough rope. If it happens again, we're going to clamp down, and we might just take one guy. So let your team know. Even if the guy retaliates, we might not catch the retaliation. We might get the guy who starts it, and you're going to be down a man. You're going to be killing a penalty. And that usually works. And then if it happens again, you've got to do what you said. You've got to call one guy. And then what happens sometimes, you call the one guy, and the casual hockey fans going, they're picking on our team. They only call one guy. He punched them back. But the reason he's not getting a penalty for it is because sending guys off in doubles 4-on-4 all game long doesn't serve a purpose. In fact, it helps a team sometimes. So the only way you make a team pay and make a team learn is by calling a differential and making them kill a penalty.
Dave, real or imagined, do series tend to have more scrums and dust-ups early on in series, kind of to establish presence, and then it drops off as the stakes elevate when these series move on towards their conclusion?
Oh, I think so. And especially in the first round where there's such an inequity of, you go first playing last type of thing. Teams know that just strictly based on skill, it's going to be tough to compete. There's a reason why they're in first place, so we need to get them off their game. So I think absolutely try and set the tone for the series. And the referees are aware of that. And they're not going to let a lesser skilled team run roughshod over a skilled team. But at the end of the day, it's still a man's game, and you still have to stand up for yourself.
Dave, before we let you go, I want to ask you something, because I'm sitting here going, I sort of feel bad because all we ask you about is officiating, referees calls, and referee this and linesman that and all this stuff. And you sit back and watch the playoffs like we do to enjoy the hockey, right? And it's not just sitting there. You're not sitting there watching the stripe guys only. You're watching the games. You have an opinion on who's playing well in the playoffs, who's going to win series and all that. And I know you're neutral in your job, but what teams have surprised you in the playoffs, and what teams do you think have a real good shot? I mean, just not that you're a fan of, but you just think by watching, you're surprised.
Well, it's funny because ESPN asks all their on-air talent for a bracket or to pick who's going to win. And I'm not included in that only because, as you said, I'm neutral. I'm not supposed to be rooting for a team or whatever. But just for fun, I make my own bracket right on my desk here where I'm sitting. And, knowing so much about the game as I do, I went 2 for 8 in the first round with my bracket. And then now
I think PK did that also, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess me and PK are on the same linear plane. So as I look at it now, I think I have, let's see, I got Vegas and Edmonton still alive, and that's about it. And Carolina. So I had Colorado Tampa in my final, and that got busted pretty early. But I did say I thought Stanley Cup finalists would come from the Dallas-Colorado series. So I like the way Dallas is playing right now. They're just really good. And, they got one injured player back. They might be getting a second back if they make it to the next round. They're going to be tough to stop. They're getting goaltending. Just fantastic. And Florida, the way Florida kind of limped into the playoffs, I thought Tampa was going to beat them in the first round. And the way they're playing now, the Toronto-Florida series, I think that's really good hockey. Either of those two teams, I think, could go all the way.
Yeah, Dave, just so you don't feel alone, I had Colorado and Florida in the final. I've had Florida to win the Cup last year, and I got them to win the Cup this year. But I mean, I got knocked out with that Colorado thing. I just think Colorado's a great team. I was worried about Tampa because of the fact that Florida plays playoff hockey all year long, and Tampa goes on skill and the tremendous abilities of guys like Kucherov. But
yeah, I'm not taking anything away from Florida when I say they limped in the playoffs, but compared to the way Tampa was playing going into the playoffs, I just thought Tampa was on this roll, and it was just their time.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, I got one that I think fans would love to hear your response to during the course of your career. Who is the best chirper? Or to that end, who is the most annoying that got in your ear and was just relentless and would never let you off the hook, would always have something to say?
Well, I mean, that list is innumerable. It's just, you spend 30 years in the NHL, you've got countless stories. I mean, I couldn't begin to list the number of guys. In recent memory, one of the best chirpers out there, it wasn't necessarily me, it was Steve Ott. Steve Ott had some of the best one-liners to his opponents that, they're not really PG rated. I can't repeat a lot of them, but he would have us in stitches in scrums and such. Rob Ray, going back, had some pretty good chirps. Also not PG. You couldn't repeat them. You got coaches. Paul Maurice has some great one-liners. You just go back through the years, and stuff happens. Spur of the moment, and if you can't laugh at it, you shouldn't be out there. And of course, we have some good chirps too. A guy will say something to you, and you come back at him. You find this perfect one-liner sometimes, and they can't help but laugh. They're all angry, and you say something to them, and they kind of get it. They kind of chuckle and go away. So I wish I had some specific chirps I could repeat, but it's really not. But there's a lot of it that goes on, from the coaches, the players, the referees, goaltenders. You're constantly talking out there. There's the fans don't. It's too bad that everybody's not mic'd up and they could just throw it out there, unedited, and hear what was said. But you just couldn't do that. But that's what I miss. People go, "What do you miss about not refereeing anymore?" I don't miss the pressure and getting yelled at, but I miss being on the ice and just being part of the community for 60 minutes, where you're friends with one guy for 30 seconds, and then he's your mortal enemy the next 30 seconds, and then you're fine again as the game ends. It just goes in waves through the whole game. It's very fluid.
Dave, like society, since 1989 has gotten, the sensitivity level has gone up so damn high. It's to an annoying point. But how about on the ice? Did you notice over all those years that the sensitivity of what you could say or what you couldn't say, or guys would hold back on saying something that they might have said 10 years earlier because of the fact that the sensitivity level of society in general?
Sure. There's stuff that was said back when I started, especially in the American Hockey League back in 86, 87. There's stuff that was said then that you certainly could not get away with saying today. It was bad even then, but it was within the glass. So you didn't really address it unless it was racial. That was always addressed. That was always unacceptable. But anything else is pretty much say what you want. As the game evolved, as society evolved, you kind of went from ignoring it to not really doing anything about it, but going over to the player and saying, "Hey, you can't say that. And if I hear you say it again, I'm going to have to eject you." And then you tell his coach, you go, "Listen, your player, I just heard him say this. If he says it again, he's going to be ejected." And then, it's kind of evolved, and then we've made rules about it. And I think for the most part, it's good. There's still a lot of chirping you can do out there and get away with it. And there's certain things you can't say. I think that's good. The thing I did notice, though, is that the classic FU back and forth to each other was always an acceptable form of communication between ref and player if nobody else was privy to it. If it was a one-on-one, almost like an umpire and a manager and a nose-to-nose, they're arguing. Nobody can hear what they're saying. As it evolved, there were times where you'd be near a bench and a player would give it to you and you give it back to him, and you'd hear from an assistant coach or a coach, "You can't talk to my player that way." Well, you're right. I shouldn't be talking to your player that way, but did you not hear what he just said to me? And he shouldn't be talking to me that way. So if you don't want me speaking to him that way, I understand, and I'll address it with a penalty next time. And then their reaction right away is, "Oh, no, okay. Carry on." So, you can't have it both ways. If I can't speak to a player in a profanity-laced tirade, which I seldom ever did, but there were times where the game didn't call for a penalty. It's a personal one-on-one. It's a victimless crime when you look at it. It's not, the other team doesn't deserve a power play because the referee said something, the player said something to me. So you put your hand over your mouth like this, so nobody can read your lips. You might say something back to him. But if I'm going to be told that I can't do that, then you better be ready for a bench minor or unsportsmanlike conduct if you choose to speak to me that way.
It's not that far off in society from speaking to a police officer that way. If you want to use some profanity to a police officer, you get what you get back. And that could be a ticket. It could be, or it could just be the same words back at you. But Dave, thanks. This has been so insightful, so great. I mean, it's such a different type of show for us than what we normally are doing, where it's just hockey, pure hockey all the time. And people like, we've had Paul Maurice on, who we were just speaking about, and that was a great show. But having you on gives us a great different viewpoint on the game, and hopefully educates people that are listening as to the reality of things, and not just what they think is going on. Like you said, that their team's getting screwed, and it's always their team that gets screwed and nobody else, when really it's 32 teams that get screwed.
You know what? I'll just say, look, caveat here at the end, for people that think the referees are trying to dictate the outcome of the playoffs or who wins, referees move on to each round strictly based on their performance in that round. And each round is bonus money for those referees. There is no conspiracy theory. Referees miss calls. Referees make bad calls. None of them are intentional. They're trying to go out there and they're trying to be perfect. And as we know from playing golf, you're never perfect. You can shoot below par and you still think you're mad at the 2 or 3 putts you missed. These guys go out there trying to be perfect every night. They never are, but they want to be perfect. And the last thing they want to do is make or miss a call that everybody's talking about, because controversy usually doesn't bode well for moving on to the next round. So these guys are out there not caring who wins, trying to do their job to the best of their ability. And the conference calls they're on before the playoffs even start, from the commissioner to hockey operations to director of officiating, Stephen Walkham, they are told, you guys know what a penalty is. If you see a penalty, call the penalty, you'll be supported, whether it's the first minute of play or second overtime. If it's a penalty, if it goes above that threshold, if it crosses the line, we want you to call the penalty and we will support you. So it just drives me nuts, all these conspiracy theories come playoff time, that the league or the referees are out to get a certain team. Could not be further from the truth. And I did it for years and years, and it used to really bother me when people thought that I was trying to put my thumb on the scale and change the outcome. It could not be further from the truth.
Well, I think those of us that have been involved in the NHL for many years know that there is no conspiracy out there, that everybody's trying to do the best they can in every job and all throughout the league, including the referees, the linesman, the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and all the way down the line. Everybody has a lot of pride in what they do, and they want to do it to the best of their ability and do it the way they're supposed to do it. It's not far off from people thinking that the Islanders got the first overall pick this year in the entry draft. How the heck could they get up 10 spots? Hey, you tell me that was just done from those little balls coming out of the machine? And I said, yeah, it actually was done just that way. There was no conspiracy to get the New York Islanders the first pick in the draft, or anybody else for that matter. So, Dave, thanks so much, from Vic and I, and it's been great, and we really appreciate you being with us and appreciate what you have done for all these years in the NHL.
It's a pleasure. You guys are gentlemen, and I just feel fortunate to be included in your podcast. So thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. Our website is NHLWraparound.com. And remember that Neil and I will be back with Stanley Cup dates continuing all this week. And our next wraparound will be the conference final preview. And also remember that on May 24th, our New York Islanders' 45th anniversary special of their first Stanley Cup championship, from doormat to dynasty, will be joined by Dennis Potvin, John Tonelli, and Ken Morrow. Before we go on to the 4 series, Dave Jackson's perspective, his insights, and a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff is just remarkable to get firsthand.
Oh, it's so much fun. For me, I can tell you, I really enjoy that. I mean, to me, it's like running into him in the bar and being able to sit down and have a couple beers and be able to talk about all these things. I don't think there's anything any different that we talked about in this show than we would talk about personally and privately.
And we had some discussion off camera as well, where he elaborated a little bit further on some of the stories. And, we often forget that the officials are the third team out there. And it's not just about the two teams playing on the ice. The referees are a pretty tight group also, along with the linesmen.
Yeah, and remember, too, that there are 5, say, in the Toronto-Florida series, there are 5 Panthers skaters out there. There are 5 Leaf skaters out there, and there are 4 officials. So you combine it, and I'm not talking about the goalies. There are 14 people out there skating very hard, and 5 of one team, 5 of the other, and 4 of the middle ones. So it's the people forget that they're out there. They're just so good at getting out of the way so that we don't even notice them.
And let's not forget the 2 goalies who referees have very frequent discussions with during the course of a game.
Yeah, well, because they're the only people that are out there the entire game. There's 6 people out there the entire game, the entire 60 minutes, the 2 goalies and the 4 officials.
Let's move on to our 4 series. We're going to start with Carolina-Washington Game 4. Then we're going to elaborate a little bit further, particularly with the 2 games that were played on Monday night. And the 5-2 win for Carolina, putting them up 3-1. 5th game will be back in Washington on Thursday at 7:00. And is this a situation where having the extra day off is going to help the Capitals perhaps more than the Hurricanes? Because this is a team that clearly needs a reset in this series.
Oh, absolutely. They got to reset. We said that they would make adjustments and be better in Game 4. They weren't. They didn't. And they're going to have to, or else they're going to be done at home on Thursday night.
When you've got a club that appears to have trouble keeping up, you would think the one thing that they would want to do is get pucks in deep, pressure, create traffic in front, get second shots. And there's been none of that from Washington in this series. And let's give credit to Carolina, certainly for the way that they have defended and their speed and their tenacity over all 200 feet of ice. But at some point, if you're Washington, you've got to make these things happen yourself. You can't depend on the other team just to start getting off their game, because it's not going to happen with Carolina.
No, it's not going to happen. You've got to make them get off their game. You've got to make changes. You've got to make the whole thing change. And that's going to be the challenge to Spencer Carberry and his group of coaches, is to get this team to change and adapt for game number 5.
One thing that I found alarming was the Washington power play, and they did score 1 goal on the 5-on-3, but on 5-on-4s, their zone entries were atrocious. And when you see a team standing 4 players up at the blue line, get the puck in, because you know your forwards have more speed than the penalty killing unit standing up. So it shouldn't be that hard to get a puck in and recapture it. And none of that's happening.
No, they've been stubborn. The Capitals have in that regard. And you would think that they would want to go in and pound the Carolina players by putting it into the corner, keeping it away from Freddie Anderson so that he can't help. And we haven't seen that yet. So we'll have to see if they adapt again in Game 5.
Couple of things for the Washington perspective. That Logan Thompson in Game 4 wasn't able to come up with the big save. And of course, he gave up what was somewhat of a softie on the second goal with Aho's shot going off of his glove, and then Seth Jarvis banging in the rebound. And then when they got the game close, the Taylor Hall breakaway, you can't fault him on, nor can you on the Sean Walker goal, but you need a save there, especially when your team's struggling, and he couldn't give it to them.
You do. You need, that's when you need the big save. And, as our friend Brian Boucher said on that one goal, he's got to catch that. It can't bounce off of him and allow a rebound. And that's what happened. So he's got to come up bigger for them in the next game and hold the fort.
Also struggling in this series with some of the playmaking, some of the decision-making has been John Carlson.
Yeah, well, John Carlson is disappointing to me, but maybe, as someone said to me this morning, his age is coming through in this series. Whereas it's not for Brent Burns, who's older than John Carlson. But John Carlson has been beaten several times in this series, one-on-one. And that can't happen when you have a guy that eats up the minutes that Carlson eats up and is on the ice for. He's got to be your steady Eddie.
Something that Carolina wants to keep going and Washington needs to reverse is this attempt edge. And again, Carolina will shoot from the parking lot. And at some point, they may or may not meet an opponent that knows how to handle this. But to this point in the series, 329 to 187 in attempts. That is an average of 82 to 47 per game. So when one team is getting 35 attempts more than the other, it's going to manifest itself. And I think we've seen that in the series.
Yeah. But they're always going to over attempt Washington, but this discrepancy is huge.
Game 4, once again, Thursday, 7:00 in Washington. The Oilers now one win away from getting back to the conference final with their 3-0 win over Vegas in Game 4. And something we touched on briefly earlier and we'll hit on again right now is that the game always teaches you something. And just like in Game 3, Oilers got up 2-0. But boy, they never let up. And the physicality combined with that speed was really impressive in that first period. That was something that I don't really think that we have seen from the Oilers at this part of the playoffs. And that sense of urgency to make certain that Vegas wasn't bringing this series back home even, very evident in the first period.
Absolutely. And the Oilers working off of the crowd that they had there, the Oilers getting better now as this series goes on. It's scary for the rest of the league. We know what happened last year. They got better and better and better as the playoffs went on, and they certainly look to be going that way. And you think about their depth now. This isn't just a show of Draisaitl and McDavid and Bouchard and the other stars and Hyman and that. They're getting contributions from Adam Henrique, who had a 2-goal game. It's been 13 years since he played for the Devils that he had a 2-goal game. So, they're getting it up and down their lineup, and they got to be a pretty confident group right now heading back to Las Vegas.
And the third goal was scored by Evander Kane, who early in the game was the player that set the tone, going hard to the net, getting Aiden Hill off of his game a little bit. And for him then to get the third goal just added insult to injury for the Golden Knights.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And Kane is a guy that can get under your skin, no doubt about it. But he's been a great addition to them in the playoffs. Never played during the regular season at all. And now has come back like he never missed a beat.
What about from the Vegas side of things, where they were good enough to get past the Minnesota Wild, but from my perspective, they're having a hard time keeping up in the series. Only 12 shots through 2 periods. I believe Edmonton kind of sat back and defended in the third period. Vegas got a little bit more pressure, but I don't feel that they are really threatening in this series. And maybe they win a 5th game, but I do not see them coming back to win this series.
No, I don't think it's close enough. I don't think when you watch the games that the games are close enough, meaning not the score, but the play is not close enough that you could say, well, with a couple lucky bounces, Vegas could have won that game. No, I don't think so. I don't see it that way. I think that this is pretty clear that Edmonton was a better team last night, and they've been the better team. And unless Vegas brings it a lot better than they have brought it the last couple of games, I don't see this going very much longer.
Oilers will try to finish it off Wednesday, 9:30 Eastern. Florida and Toronto will play Game 5 on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. That series is tied at 2 apiece. We saw in Game 4, classic Panthers hockey, hard-hitting, not a lot of room on the ice, relentless for 60 minutes. Craig Berube knows what needs to happen for his team to turn this thing back around. And this is where his personnel is going to get the biggest test that it has gotten yet, because they have played with the Panthers. They have stood up to the Panthers. But playing with them and beating them are two very different things.
Absolutely. And they were able to do it in Game 1 and Game 2 when they were at home. And then, of course, we know they went down to Florida and they lost Game 3 and 4, and that's why it's tied at 2-2. They can win. This is a series where I will say that Toronto could win this series. I don't predict that. I predict that Florida is like a boxer that comes out and maybe takes a number of punches in the first couple rounds, may even look like, oh my God, he's going to go down. But then he's wearing out his opponent, and then he's going to bring it in the later rounds. And I think that's the way Florida is going. They're going like a heavyweight boxer, and I think they're going to bring it more and more as the series goes on.
What does the extra day do for Toronto? I think certainly it's going to help Florida in that maybe another day off in between games 4 and 5 might enable Evan Rodriguez to come back into the lineup. But for Toronto, who has seen this 2-0 lead get away, what does Berube do with that extra day?
Well, it's a rest day for both sides, but I think the rest is is more meaningful and helpful to the Panthers than to the Leafs. The Leafs aren't as banged up as the Panthers were going into this. By the way, Evan Rodriguez was on the ice today in their optional skate. They had an optional skate today, and he was out there skating. So that's a good sign, because if he was hurt, he wouldn't have even been on the ice at all. But I think the extra day off is going to be more helpful for the Panthers, because for an example, there's something wrong with Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, he played a lot better last game, and maybe whatever it is healing on him. But boy, that extra day will help him, because he has been banged up all year. And there's other players that we don't even know about that are hurt, that are playing for Florida. So I think it'll be better for them than for Toronto, but Toronto gets home ice. Toronto plays better at home. Obviously, they won the first 2 games. So this will be a dogfight again in Game 5.
Another player that could probably use the extra day is Auston Matthews. And this is the classic glass half full, half empty, because many are saying that his total game looks good, but he's not shooting and he's not producing enough. And this is where the rub is for a lot of people that are looking for the Leafs captain to break out and become a dominant player the way he is during the regular season.
Yeah, and that's mostly the Toronto media is getting all over him. Last year, they were all over Mitch Marner. They're missing in action last year, and this year it's Matthews. And, I tend to agree with you on one thing, and we talked about the other day, is that if the Leafs win, it doesn't matter whether Matthews scored or not. They won. When the Leafs don't win, now all of a sudden, well, why isn't Matthews scoring? And so, that's just that's the territory when you make $13 million and you've gotten 69 goals one season. People want you to come through for them. But Toronto media and Toronto in itself is vicious with their players. It's so important to the city how the Leafs do, that it's, I mean, I hope these guys are hiding from looking at the news or reading the newspapers or online.
Game 5, Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern. The lone game that is being played Tuesday, 8 o'clock, ESPN gets back into the mix. Winnipeg and Dallas, with the Stars holding a 2-1 edge. But in simplest terms, Winnipeg has shot blanks on the road so far in this postseason. They're 0-4. How do they manage to win a road game?
Score more goals than the other team. It's funny, Vic. We talked about with Dave Jackson about conspiracy theories and conspiracy thinkers and all that stuff, and I tend to immediately go to, well, like, come on, Neil. It's they just haven't. The other teams just beat them, but there is something to this now. There is something to that they can't win a game on the road, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just something. They're not playing as well when they get in other buildings. And what have they got to do? I mean it. They got to score more goals than the other team scores. Hellebuck's got to play as well on the road as he does at home. And they got to get the monkey off their back.
You've got such opposites in terms of performance that Hellebuck, as we had mentioned on Monday on Stanley Cup date, 4+ goals against in 8 consecutive playoff games on the road, 5.83 goals against, 827 save percentage. And on the other side, Mikko Rantanen has been in on 15 out of the last 17 Dallas goals. So Peter DeBoer has the last change, but does Scott Arniel maybe try to counter this when he can by putting his third line to shadow Rantanen and company with Adam Lowry, Nino Niederreiter, and Mason Appleton? Is it possible to shadow?
I don't know that you can shadow, but you've got to be aware and you've got to, win puck battles. And I mean, Rantanen is doing everything right. He has like a split second with the puck and puts it on the net, and it ends up in the net from a rebound. He's doing everything right. And, they're just going to have to be aware when he's on the ice, and they can beat this team. Obviously, in Winnipeg, they can beat them. But as you said, they got to win a game in Dallas.
Both of these teams went 7 in the opening round, but it looks more and more like the physical toll that the Blues took on the Jets is having more of an effect than the Avalanche and their series against the Stars. That's
very much true. And it just goes to show you the physicality of the two series. And again, rest is everything, and trying to get your brain rested as well.
Once again, Game 4, Tuesday, 8 p.m.
And one little tidbit is that Miro Heiskanen is expected to play in the game if he makes it through the morning skate with no issues. So you might be seeing Miro Heiskanen finally back in the Dallas lineup.
And that would be his first game since he was injured on January 28th when he got tangled up with Mark Stone of the Vegas Golden Knights. This is the human side of the story, and Neil and I have both been at our respective careers involved in hockey over 4 decades apiece. And to this day, one of the things that I think we most cherish are the relationships that we've built and some of the reconnections that we've made. And my career opened in 1984 with a chance encounter with long-time writer and legend Stan Fischler at an all-star dinner in New Jersey in January of 1984. And it's a relationship that I still have with him today. He lives in Israel. He is 93 years old, and we still stay in touch, and we're going to have him on at some point during the course of the Stanley Cup Finals. But when I was recording and looking at some of the areas that we want to really make strong for this Islander special that we're going to be doing. I got some music that will be playing underneath the read of the open. And when I put the music through my ears and I did the read, I came to the conclusion that this just doesn't feel big enough for me. And I asked you to see if you had Jigs McDonald's number, and indeed you did. And when I broke in 1984, I started doing analytical stats for the New York Islanders and Sports Channel. And this was the first time it had actually been done on hockey broadcast. But Jigs and I had not seen or spoken to each other since I think we were poolside during the Barcelona Olympics in 1992 when I was working for NBC and he was working for CBC. And to have that discussion, to reconnect with him yesterday was so special. And he will be doing the voiceover for the open for this show. And I know, Neil, that you have to have some sort of story like that as well.
Oh, I've got so many of those stories. I started in 1980 with the New York Islanders, and I've met so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people along the way, each of them very special. Rich Torrey, Bill Torrey's son, who's my age, I met in 1980, 81, along with Jay Arbor, Al Arbor's son. We were all at the Islanders. And to this day, when I talk to Rich Torrey on the phone, I see in my mind is the guy that I knew in 1980. It's not the guy that today looks like Bill Torrey. It's the guy that had the dark hair and the dark beard and was a lot thinner and younger and so on. And it's the same with Jigs. When I talked to Jigs the other day, Jigs McDonald, I see Jigs the way I remember him in those early 80s doing the games. When I would see those guys, him and Eddie Westfall, I would see them at every game. And it's the same with Ken Holland. I hired him in 1985. He had been the goalie for Adirondack. I was the GM, and I hired him as the Western scout, taught him how to go to the games, how to scout, because it's not as easy as just showing up at a game. You need to know, where do I sit? Where do I get the lineup? Who am I looking at? So on and so forth. And now Ken is who Ken is, and getting the job now to be the LA Kings GM, his third job. And, you still see them as you knew them back then. And that's what I think really hurts when we lose people, is that we don't get to hear John Saunders' voice anymore. We don't get to hear others that have been so special to us over the years. Ray Shiro, Greg Millen, just to name two recent departures. You don't get to hear their voice. You don't get to see them. You don't get the same smirk that reminds you of the 80s or the 90s or whenever it was. And it's just part of life. But I think we're very blessed to have been in something that we would have done for free and done it and got paid and met just a world of wonderful people that we still keep in touch with and that mean so much to us.
You and I know each other through John when we met in 1990, and just to have my own career feel like it is coming full circle from meeting Stan and working with Jigs and doing 2 books with Stan before going over to ESPN and now doing NHL Wraparound with you 40 plus years after I started in the business. It is just a great way to just be so appreciative of everything that has taken place over these decades.
And what makes this show here near the end of our careers so special is that all these people that we've known over the years can come back on here and talk to us about hockey and talk to us about current hockey, past hockey, memories in hockey. And that's, to me, that's what makes this so much fun to do this podcast with you, is that I get to go back and visit with all these folks I've known over the years.
Even though this is the end of our careers, so to speak, we have plenty of tread on the tire, and we plan on doing this for a long time downwind.
That's right. That is exactly right. But this is a great, let's call it post-career career.
Indeed, we will. And that'll wrap up NHL Wraparound for today. Thanks to Dave Jackson from ESPN for joining us. Thanks to UBS Financial Services, Inc. NHL Wraparound and UBS Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. UBS is a sponsor of 3 things you need to pay attention to. No other affiliation, relationship, or endorsement is made, suggested, intended, or should be implied or inferred between UBS and VNS Productions, LLC, or any of the individuals or businesses and or their respective products and services appearing in this program. Thank you, as always, to our great listeners. Send questions or comments to nhlwraparound@gmail.com. You can also reach us individually at neil@nhlwraparound.com or Vic at nhlwraparound.com. And just remember, all of our podcasts are on all platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and our complete catalog can be found on our website, nhlwraparound.com. So please subscribe. Tell your friends, family, subscribe. Like us on Facebook, and also check out some of our shorter clips on X at NHL Wraparound. Neil and I will be back on Wednesday with the latest edition of Stanley Cup Day. We'll speak with you then.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.